At 3:12 a.m., my phone exploded in the dark, one shrill ring that sliced straight through my chest. And then Evan's voice, my grown son, trembling like a man standing inches from death. "Dad, get out. Get out of the house, right now. Don't grab anything. Just run." There are moments in a man's life, especially at 55, when the world doesn't just shake. It splits clean and merciless, like someone taking a knife to the center of everything you thought was safe. That was the moment for me. Bare feet on cold hardwood, heart hammering against ribs that suddenly felt 10 years older, and the sick metallic taste of knowing something inside my home wanted me dead. My name is Gabriel Meyer, and if you're watching this video, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about the revenge story I'm about to tell you. I need to know how fast the truth has traveled, and whether the people who tried to bury me are finally being buried themselves. I used to think danger only lived out there, out in the alleys, the back rooms, the motel corridors where men whispered things they prayed would never hit the airwaves. 30 years of chasing the worst of America's underbelly for PBS had carved that belief into me. Drug rings in Nevada, a trafficking ring in Yakima, a sheriff's department in Idaho that nearly burned my car with me in it. I lived through all of it, survived on instinct, timing, and a sense of justice that cost me more relationships than I care to admit. But nothing prepares you for the moment danger moves into your own living room and takes its shoes off. When I met Leah, 41, bright smile, voice smooth like river water, I thought maybe life was giving me a second chance. After losing my first wife Hannah to cancer, I didn't believe I had room left in me for commitment. Losing someone the slow way, watching them fade day by day, is a different kind of death. It takes parts of you too. So when Leah came along 4 years after Hannah passed, gentle but confident, it felt like maybe someone had turned a light back on in a room I'd locked. I remarried at 55. Some people call that courage. Some call it foolish. Depends who you ask. Life after the wedding felt quite steady, almost peaceful. Leah and I had a routine coffee on the deck, overlooking the Sound dinner at the same little bistro down on Harborview, and evenings where we'd read in the same room, not speaking, just being. A man my age doesn't ask for much more than that. But peace is a fragile thing. Sometimes all it takes is one knock on the door to remind you it's borrowed, not owned. That afternoon, that knock belonged to Evan. He stood on my porch with a duffel bag, jaw tight, the way it gets when he's been thinking too much. 29 years old, broad-shouldered, sharper than he gives himself credit for. He's always had his mother's eyes, dark, steady, always scanning. I hadn't seen him in 3 weeks, not since my last documentary aired. The one about corporate land grabs in rural Washington, the one that got me a handful of death threats. I tried to laugh off. "Dad," he said, not even waiting to be invited inside. "We need to talk." Next thing I knew, he was pulling ladders out of his truck and unpacking camera gear across my living room floor. Small cameras, high-end motion-triggered night vision things you'd expect an intelligence team to use, not your own son. "Evan," I said, watching him mount the first one near the ceiling beam. "This is overkill." "No," he shot back. "This is me keeping you alive." There's a special kind of silence that happens between a father and a grown son when one of them crosses an invisible line. I felt that silence stretch across the room as I crossed my arms and stared at him. He didn't flinch. "Those threats weren't jokes," he said, sliding off the ladder. "People are pissed, Dad. You exposed billionaires who don't like being exposed. I've dealt with worse. Maybe when you were 40. Not now." That one landed deeper than I let him see. We'd been drifting for years. He blamed my work for how much I was gone during his childhood, and I didn't exactly fight that accusation. I thought time would fix it. It didn't. Losing Hannah only cracked us further. By the time I remarried, Evan had this wall around him I didn't know how to climb. And yet here he was, installing cameras like a man trying to bolt his father's life into place before it slipped out of his hands again. Leah wasn't home. Probably for the best. She didn't like Evan's energy, as she put it. Said he brought too much heaviness into the house. I didn't agree, but I didn't argue either. Marriage teaches you which battles are worth picking, especially at my age. By sundown, there were cameras in the hallways, the kitchen, the office, even the deck outside. All feeds go to your phone, Evan said, handing me a small black module. And mine. If someone steps foot in this house with bad intentions, we'll know. I've been in this house for 3 years, I muttered. Nothing's happened. His eyes flicked toward the kitchen. Something passed through them, something uncertain, maybe even afraid. That's what worries me. When he left that night, we hugged awkward stiff, but it meant something. I watched his taillights vanish into the street, then stood in the doorway a minute longer than necessary, breathing in that quiet that suddenly didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. It felt wrong. Leah came home later, smiled, kissed my cheek, heated leftover pasta. She asked why tools were lying around. I gave her some half-true explanation about Evan wanting to upgrade security. She nodded, though her smile tightened at the edges, like she didn't like the idea of anyone touching the house. We went to bed around 11, but sleep didn't come. Maybe it was the cameras. Maybe it was the weight of Evan's worry sitting heavy in my chest. Maybe it was something else, something I'd been ignoring, brushing off as age stress, the residue of too many years chasing stories in the dark. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, wood settling, pipes cooling. Then sometime close to 2 a.m., a soft red blink appeared across the room, one of the cameras catching motion. I sat up slowly. Another blink, then another, and then footsteps, soft, bare, moving across the kitchen tile. But Leah was lying right beneath me. My throat tightened. My skin prickled. Someone or something was walking in my house at 2:30 a.m., and I hadn't even begun to understand just how deep the cracks in my peaceful life truly ran. It was 3:12 a.m. when my world cracked open. The phone buzzed once, sharp, violent, like it was being hurled against my chest instead of vibrating on the nightstand. I grabbed it on instinct, still half in a dream, half in that foggy space where nothing makes sense yet. Evan's name was on the screen. My son doesn't call at 3 a.m., not unless something's on fire or someone's dying. Dad. His voice hit me before the sentence even formed, shaking, breathless. Get out. Get out of the house, right now. Don't grab anything. Don't wake her. Just run. All the warmth in my body drained at once. I swung my legs off the bed, heart slamming against my ribs. Leah lay beside me, turned away, her breathing soft and steady, too steady, like someone rehearsing sleep. Evan, what happened? I whispered, already, reaching for my jeans, my keys. My hands weren't listening to me. They were moving on pure instinct. Dad, don't argue, don't ask, just move. Is someone in the house? A pause, then quietly, yes. That was all I needed. I slipped out of the bedroom barefoot, every step careful on the cold hardwood. The house was dark except for the faint blinking of the security cameras he'd installed just a day before. Blinking, watching, recording. I didn't dare look toward the kitchen. Not after the footsteps at 2 a.m. The rain outside was relentless, the kind that needles your skin and soaks you through in seconds. Washington rain doesn't fall, it attacks. I pushed through it, sprinting across the driveway, lungs burning, the wind cutting through my shirt like knives. I didn't stop until the car door shut behind me. I locked it, then locked it again, like the extra click would save me from something already crawling in my wounds. Okay, I gasped into the phone. I'm in the car. Now tell me, Drive Evans said. You know that old diner off Highway 16, Donna's place. Get there. I'm 5 minutes ahead of you. Evan, just drive, Dad. Please. I'd only heard my son beg twice in his life. This made 3. By the time I reached Donna's place, the storm had turned the parking lot into a dark mirror. Evan's truck was parked sideways, hazard lights blinking like a distress beacon. He met me outside before I even got out. His clothes were soaked. His hands were shaking. But it was his eyes that told me everything. They were the same eyes he had at 10 years old, the night he found out his mother wasn't going to beat the cancer. Fear. The kind that grows roots. Inside, he said, gripping my arm. This isn't a conversation we have in the rain. Donna's place was half lit, half dead. The kind of diner where old truckers and tired souls gather at ungodly hours. Coffee burned in a pot somewhere behind the counter, the smell sharp enough to sting. We took the back booth. Evan didn't even sit, just opened his laptop with a trembling hand. Dad, he said, voice breaking, you need to watch this. The screen loaded a night vision clip, time-stamped 2:11 a.m. My kitchen. Empty at first. Then Leah walked in. Her robe tied loosely, her hair down. She moved with a confidence that didn't belong to the woman I shared a bed with. She kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone. She wasn't disappointed. A man walked in behind her, tall, hard face, a faint scar along his left cheek. My stomach dropped. Colby Reed, I whispered. Yeah. Evan's jaw clenched. I recognized him from your documentary on the Timberline case. The guy who walked after witness intimidation. One of the few men I ever regretted exposing because I failed to put him behind bars. On the screen, Leah pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet. Colby leaned in and asked, You sure he'll drink it tonight? He drinks it every night. Leah said, her voice colder than I've ever heard it. The heart meds will make it look natural. 55, stressful career, family history. No one asks questions. Family history. My father. Heart failure at 56, my throat tightened. Colby paced the kitchen like he owned it. And after he's gone, Leah smiled. A smile I didn't know she could make. Insurance pays out. The house goes to me. And the footage he's been compiling, you'll have what you need before anyone notices it's gone. My hands turned to fists under the table. But Evan wasn't watching the screen. He was watching me. There's more, he said quietly. More. The video continued. Leah moved closer to Colby, resting a hand on his chest. You promised me, she whispered. When this is over, we're done living in the shadows. He kissed her. In my kitchen. In the home I built. In the life I thought was safe. I swallowed hard, but it didn't go down. When the clip ended, Evan closed the laptop gently, like even shutting it hurt. Dad, I've been watching her for 2 months. I stared at him. What? She's been lying to you. Leaving at weird hours. Making calls in the garage. I didn't know for sure, not until last night. 2 months. 2 months my son had been carrying this alone. 2 months while I slept next to a woman who was poisoning me. Guilt slammed into me harder than fear. I leaned back, breathing slow, steady, the way I used to before confronting dangerous interview subjects. So I finally said, What's our next step? Evan blinked, like he didn't expect that question. We go to the police. No. Dad. What do you mean, no? If we go now, we have a video of a conversation. They'll claim it's out of context. Tampered, a joke. Hell, they might even twist it on you. So what? We wait until she kills you. I shook my head. We make them think they're winning. Evan stared at me, confused, angry, terrified. But then he saw something in me. Something from all those years he watched me dismantle liars on camera. That old instinct. The part of me that doesn't just survive, it hunts. A long silence stretched between us, until Evan finally whispered, "Dad, what exactly are you planning?" I met his eyes steady as I could. "I'm going to let them walk straight into their own grave. And I'm going to be the one holding the camera this time." I drove home just after sunrise, the rain still clinging to the windshield, like it refused to let me go. My clothes were stiff from the night. My bones felt older than 55. But the part of me that hurt most wasn't my knees or my back. It was something hollowed out behind my ribs, something soft and human that Leah had carved into without ever raising her voice. Betrayal is a strange thing at my age. When you're young, betrayal feels sharp like fire or glass. But at 55, it feels heavy. It feels slow. It feels like drowning with your eyes open. I walked through the front door with the same calm I used to use before interviewing a corrupt sheriff. Act like you know nothing. Act like you're tired. Act like you believe your world is still intact. Leah was already in the kitchen, humming a sound I'd once thought was comforting. She turned to me with a sweetness so polished it almost squeaked. "There you are," she said, smiling too wide. "I was worried. You weren't beside me when I woke up." "I went out for a drive," I murmured, rubbing my face. "Couldn't sleep." She stepped closer, brushed my cheek with her hand. Her skin felt warm, too warm for someone whose heart was made of winter. "You should have taken a jacket," she said. "You'll get sick." I almost laughed. I was already sick, just not from the cold. She pulled out a bottle of Macallan, my favorite, and poured 2 fingers into the glass with the ease of a woman who'd memorized my habits. "Here," she said. "Warm up." I held the glass, swirled it, smiled. "Thanks," I said. "This helps." Then I watched her watching me. So I lifted it to my lips, let the liquid touch my mouth, but didn't swallow. I'd learned that trick back when I was interviewing violent offenders in their homes. Pretend to drink, let trust do the heavy lifting. I set the glass down. She relaxed. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Every muscle in her shoulders eased like a predator, satisfied that the trap had sprung. The moment she stepped out to take a shower, I poured the scotch down the sink. It swirled down the drain like a little funeral procession. I stared at the empty glass and felt something old and familiar rise in me. A survival instinct I thought I'd hung up years ago. Not rage, not vengeance. Something colder, more controlled. The part of me that had once spent nights in motels with a hidden camera strapped to my chest waiting for criminals to confess. The part of me that doesn't die easy. Around noon, my phone buzzed, a message from Evan. "Dad, you need to see this now." He sent a clip from the kitchen camera. Leah pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear. "I told you the policy pays double because it's accidental," she snapped. "His age works in our favor." The cardiologist already noted stress at his last appointment. A pause. Then she lowered her voice like she was afraid of being overheard. No, I haven't given him the final dose yet. Tonight. It has to be tonight. I don't want this dragging out." She leaned against the counter, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Look, I did my part. I married him. I got access. You promised me this wouldn't take this long. You promised me we'd be gone before anyone noticed." My stomach turned. Not just hatred, not just greed, not just lust for another man. She wanted me erased clean, like I was an old photo she didn't like hanging on the wall. I breathed slowly, letting the anger settle. Anger is lethal if you rush it, but if you hold it quiet, steady, it becomes something else, something useful. I typed back to Evan. I know what to do. In my office, sunlight cut across the desk in thin, cold lines. I opened the safe and stared at the stacks of hard drives, my life's work. Interviews, documents, evidence on men like Colby Reed. The real files were already duplicated and stored off-site. They were safe. What I needed now was something dangerous. Something that looked real enough to kill for. So I started building a box of lies wrapped in enough truth to make it believable. Fake financial reports. Fabricated witness accounts from old case. Maps of land parcels tied to criminal development schemes. Screenshots of emails that never existed, all pointing to one man, Colby Reed. A neat little package that made it look like I had evidence that could burn his entire operation to the ground. I printed everything out, placed it in a labeled folder, and tucked a tiny tracker inside the flap. Old habits die hard, and sometimes they save your life. By the time Leah came downstairs, I had the folder half sticking out of my briefcase, the way a man does when he's too tired to hide something. "What's that?" she asked lightly. "Just some things I need to lock up," I said. "Too many threats lately." Her eyes flicked to the briefcase, then to me, then back again. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyelids. "Be careful," she said softly. I nodded. If she only knew. That night around midnight, I pretended to fall asleep on the couch. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, barefoot, moving like a shadow across the living room. I heard the faint click of my laptop opening. She tried my birthday first. Wrong. Our anniversary. Wrong. My late wife's birthday. Wrong. Then something sharper. My daughter's old locker combination. Something I'd once mentioned years ago. The screen lit up. She whispered, "Got you." What she didn't know was that the little camera in the bookshelf was already recording. I cracked my eyelids just enough to see her face lit by the blue glow of the screen. She opened my documents, scrolled through folders, stopped on one titled, "Timberline. Confidential." Her breath hitched. I felt my pulse jump. She'd found it. The one thing I didn't intend for her to find tonight. Not yet. Not like this. And she whispered almost to herself, "So this is what he's been hiding." By sunrise the next day, my mind was sharper than it had been in months. Fear has a way of waking you up, aging you too, but waking you up first. My hands shook a little as I screwed open the back of an old USB stick, but it wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. The same kind I used to feel before confronting a cartel lawyer or a crooked senator. I loaded the drive with the perfect blend of poison and fiction. Dozens of PDF spreadsheets, wire transfer screenshots, some real, some not, painting a picture of a money laundering network that would make any criminal wet himself. Enough for a prison sentence. Enough to make someone like Colby Reed desperate. At the bottom of the folder, I placed one final file. Evidence redacted, do not open. People like Colby always open that one first. And inside, a hidden tracker and a silent program that pinged its location every 60 seconds. I shut the USB, clipped it to a key ring, and locked it inside the safe behind my office painting. Then I made sure Leah saw me do it. I didn't look at her, but I felt her gaze on my back, quiet, anxious, hungry. Taking it to the bank in Tacoma, I said as casually as if I were announcing a grocery run. The more distance from the threats, the better. She froze for half a second. I pretended not to notice. "Drive safe," she said, masking the tremor in her voice. "I will." She kissed my cheek before I left the room. Her lips felt like ice. Evan texted me an hour later. "Dad, you need to check your email. Now." I stepped into my truck, pretended to adjust the mirrors in case Leah was watching from the window, then opened the video he'd sent. It was a camera feed from outside the house, one I didn't even know Evan had installed under the garden lantern. Timestamp 1:41 a.m. Leah slipped out the side door, hoodie pulled tight, moving like a woman who thought the night belonged to her. The next clip made my jaw clench. A Walmart parking lot, the old abandoned one off Route 12. A place where deals went down long before Amazon killed half the retail in Washington. Leah walked up to Colby Reed, his crooked nose and thick neck, unmistakable even in the dim light. But he wasn't alone. Two men stood beside him. One tall and wiry with a tribal tattoo crawling up his neck. The other bald, heavy-set with eyes like wet gravel. I recognized neither of them, which made them more dangerous. Evan had boosted the audio. Colby's voice came through first. "You said he's moving the drive today," he hissed. Leah nodded. "It's in the safe. He'll take it to Tacoma this afternoon. He told me this morning." "And you're sure he'll drink it tonight?" Colby pressed. Her silence answered for her. Then she whispered, "I want this over, Colby. I want my life back." He touched her cheek, and something inside me twisted. Not jealousy, not heartbreak. Disgust. Disgust for her. Disgust for him. Disgust for myself, for ever letting her into my life. The tattooed man stepped forward. "Boss, we should move tonight. 2 cups of shove down the stairs, whatever. Clean. Quiet." Leah swallowed hard. "Tonight." Evan's voice cracked through the phone. "Dad, you're not coming back here alone anymore. We go to the police." "No." I said, "Dad." "No." My voice surprised even me. Steady, sharp. "If we go to the police with this, she'll run. Colby will disappear. His guys will too. They've lived their lives slipping through cracks." "But Evan," I said, "quieter now. This ends because we end it, not because we hand it off." There was a long silence then. "You have help." I frowned. "Whose help?" A car pulled into the driveway behind Evan in the video he sent. A tall man stepped out, late 50s, gray-beard eyes that had seen things most men pretend don't exist. Mark Halstead. A former FBI agent I'd worked with 15 years ago on a documentary about human trafficking. A man who once pulled me out of a motel room seconds before it was lit on fire. He walked straight to Evan and shook his hand. "He called me last night," Evan said through the speaker. "He said he owed you one." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Mark looked into the camera like he knew I was watching. "Gabe," he said, voice gravelly calm, "looks like your past caught up." "It usually does," I murmured. "We'll run surveillance," Mark continued. "My old contacts in Seattle PD and the Bureau know to stay quiet. We keep this contained until we have something solid. And when we do," I asked. He smirked. "Then we squeeze." By evening, 4 forces were already moving without ever speaking to one another. Leah thinking her performance was airmate, tracking my every move, waiting to finish what she started. Colby hungry for the USB, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd rather shoot first and argue later. Mark and the FBI weaving silent threads around the perimeter, waiting for the moment the trap would snap shut. And me, a tired, grieving 55-year-old man, with just enough life left to make damn sure the ending belonged to me, not them. We were all circling the same spot on the map. A collision course, a storm tightening. And none of us, not even me, knew which part of the plan was going to break first. I left the house at 9:30 p.m. sharp, the way a man leaves for a predictable errand. Calm routine, almost boring. I made sure Leah watched me from the kitchen doorway as I pocketed the silver USB drive and slipped it into my jacket. I even gave her a soft smile, the kind a husband gives a wife who has no idea her entire life is about to unravel. "Don't wait up," I told her. "I won't," she said without thinking, then corrected herself so fast it nearly tripped her tongue. "I mean, I'll stay awake till you get back." "Sure," I said, walking out the door. The moment it closed behind me, I felt the act fall from my face like a mask tossed in the dirt. It was raining, hard. Washington rain, the kind that doesn't fall straight, but sideways like it has something personal against you. My jacket soaked through as I walked to the truck, and the USB, in my pocket, felt heavier than metal. Felt like a death sentence for someone. I just didn't know who yet. Behind the living room window, Leah moved like a shadow pouring something into a mug of chamomile tea. I knew the script now. A few drops, a gentle stir, the perfect warm gesture before bed. She turned looking for me. She thought I'd come in for a sip, like I always had. But I was already driving away, wipers slashing across the windshield as the house disappeared into the black. The road carved through the pines like a scar. Branches whipped in the wind, the headlights catching their wild dance. Being 55 feels different in nights like this. You feel every old injury, every memory you don't want, every mistake that once made sense. My ex-wife had died 8 years ago. I didn't think grief could strike twice. I was wrong. I wasn't grieving Leah. I was grieving the stupidity of believing in second chances. I drove deeper into the woods until the road narrowed into a dirt path. The old warehouse one I'd quietly rented under a false name sat like a rusted spine against the tree line. One of those forgotten places where teenagers drink, where stray dogs hide from fireworks, where no one ever asks questions. Perfect for the stage I needed. Inside, hidden between rotting beams and abandoned crates, were 4 motion-triggered cameras. Evan and I installed 2 nights earlier. They were waiting. So was I. I checked my watch. 10:12 p.m. Right on time. In my rear-view mirror, 2 sets of headlights glowed faintly through the rain. Colby's black SUV. And the car behind it, battered tan, the kind used by men who don't mind blood on the upholstery. They'd followed me for 12 miles, trying to look casual, pretending to blend with the empty highway. I didn't speed up, didn't slow down. The whole point of bait is that it doesn't run. I parked at the warehouse entrance, stepped out, and pretended to fumble with my keys, giving them time to get into position. The wind howled through the metal siding, making the whole structure groan like an old animal. I unlocked the warehouse door, stepped inside, and left it slightly open. A welcome sign. The cameras blinked red, one by one. My breath fogged in the cold, the air tasting like rain and rust and tension. I whispered to myself, "Showtime, Gabe." Meanwhile, in the house I'd just left, Leah lifted the mug of tea now laced with enough medication to drop a horse and smiled to herself. She brought it upstairs, placed it on my nightstand, folded my blanket like she expected a corpse to crawl under it later. Then she checked her phone. No messages from me. But there was one from Colby. On him. "Will update." She smiled, a cruel, relieved smile. She had no idea she'd been watching an empty performance. Back at the warehouse, I heard the sound before I saw the headlights. 2 engines cutting off. Car doors slamming. Muted voices trying to stay quiet, but too adrenaline-fueled to pull it off. I pressed against a column, breathing steady. Age teaches you that patience is more dangerous than violence. Footsteps squelched in the mud outside. Someone cursed under their breath. And then, a 3rd car pulled up. Brighter lights, a cleaner engine. Tires that didn't squeal, didn't hesitate. I frowned. That wasn't part of the script. Colby's guys stiffened outside. I could hear it in their posture. People like them always shift when something isn't expected. The 3rd engine died. A door shut softly. Then footsteps. Measured. Purposeful. Not a criminal's stride. Not law enforcement either. Someone who belonged here in a way the others didn't. The warehouse door creaked open wider, not pushed, but nudged by a hand that knew exactly how heavy old metal should feel. and in stepped a man I never expected to see holding a flashlight and a leather satchel. Daniel, my brother-in-law, my late wife's older brother, a man who had stood beside me at her funeral, who'd held my shoulder when my world collapsed the first time. Gabe, he called gently. You here? My stomach turned cold. Colby's men stiffened outside. Daniel took a step forward, wiping rain off his glasses, scanning the warehouse as if he'd been here before, maybe many times. Maybe too many. His voice echoed softly. We need to talk before it gets worse. And for the second time that night, the ground shifted beneath everything I thought I knew. Daniel hovered in the doorway like a ghost that had climbed out of an old memory. My wife's brother soaked from the rain, eyes swollen with a guilt he didn't dare name. The flashlight in his hand shivered just enough for me to notice. Gabe, I didn't want it to get this far, he whispered. The betrayal of a spouse is one thing, but the betrayal of family tied to the person you loved and buried, that hits a place deeper than bone. I stepped out from behind the column, hands visible, voice low. What are you doing here, Dan? He winced at the way I said his name. Please don't look at me like that. I didn't come to hurt you. Then why follow Colby into the woods at night like a stray dog? His shoulders sagged as the truth cracked through him. Because I owe him. I owe a lot of people. Money I can't pay, choices I shouldn't have made. He swallowed hard. And Colby offered a way out. I stared at him. A good man once, a teacher, a father, a husband. Now standing in front of me in a warehouse at 10:30 at night, bargaining with criminals who wanted me dead. What did he promise you? I asked quietly. He looked down at his shoes like a scolded child. To clear my debt. That's all. I thought maybe nobody had to get hurt. I almost laughed. A bitter, wounded sound. Somebody always gets hurt, Dan. You should know that. Before he could answer, the warehouse door slammed open behind him, banging against the wall with a metallic crack. Colby Reed exploded into the room, water dripping off his jacket boots, stomping mud across the concrete. The two men flanking him, spread out like wolves, guns partially drawn. Daniel froze. Colby clapped a hand on his shoulder, hard enough to make him wince. Well, he drawled, family reunions ahead of schedule. I kept my face still, my heartbeat steady. Every camera in the rafters was rolling. Colby walked toward me, his grin bright as bad neon. You've been busy, Gabe. Running off to banks, hiding files, making our girl nervous. My jaw clenched. Our girl, I repeated. Colby chuckled. Leah. She's the one who brought me in. Remember, hell, she's been driving this bus since the day she slipped that ring on your finger. Daniel flinched. Even he hadn't known that. Colby leaned in close enough that I could smell rain tobacco and arrogance. She wants the insurance money, wants the house, wants the freedom. And she wants you buried before the week's out. The words landed like a blow, even though I already knew. Knowing something and hearing it from your would-be killer are two different sensations in the gut. Outside, thunder cracked. The roof rattled with the weight of the storm. Inside the surveillance van, hidden 200 yards away, Evan was watching everything with wide eyes, knuckles white around the edge of his tablet. Let me go in, he snapped. Mark, he's gonna kill my dad. Mark Halstead put a hand on his shoulder, firm. Not yet. He needs them to confess fully. Cameras are rolling. 30 more seconds, Evan. Don't blow this. Evan shook with fury but stayed put. Back in the warehouse, Colby tapped the pistol at his hip. Here's how tonight goes, he said. You open the safe. You hand me the USB. Daniel here drives you back home so Leah can finish the job. Nice and tidy. Heart failure, peaceful. No bullets, no blood. Daniel whispered, Colby, please. Colby shoved him aside like a loose chair. Shut up, Dan. You've been whining all week. I lifted my chin. What's Leah getting out of this? Really? Colby smiled. Oh, everything. Money, house, insurance payout. And me? Daniel's eyes widened. He hadn't known that part either. Colby enjoyed every second of the destruction he caused. She was never yours, old man, he sneered. She was playing you from day one. And tonight, we wrap this up. He pulled his gun free, pointing it directly at my chest. Open the safe in the back. Now. I didn't move. Colby cocked the hammer. The sound ricocheted across the warehouse. Somewhere in the rafters, one of the hidden cameras beeped faintly as it adjusted to capture the shot. I heard it. Colby didn't. He jabbed the gun toward me again. Gabe, don't make me ask twice. I stepped backward toward the fake safe Evan and I had installed. My boots echoed against the concrete. Every step felt like moving through a pool of thick memory, of Leah's smile, of Daniel's grief, of Evan's fear. Behind us, the storm wailed against the tin roof. Last chance, Colby growled. I reached for the safe handle. And then, from outside, faint at first, growing louder, a sound carried through the trees and into the warehouse walls. Not thunder, not wind. Sirens. Multiple. Fist. Colby snapped his head toward the door. What the hell? At the same time, one of his men raised his weapon in panic, cocking it with a sharp metallic click, a sound that made every nerve in my body ignite. Sirens closing in, guns lifting, cameras rolling, and no one knowing who would fire first. The sirens bled through the trees, thin at first, then rising like a tide that couldn't be argued with. Colby spun toward the door, cursing under his breath, gun swinging in my direction again. What did you do, old man? I didn't lift my hands. I didn't flinch. I'd stood across from cartel lieutenants with machetes and white-collar crooks with private armies. One angry thug with a pistol wasn't going to shake me. Colby, I said, my voice even it made him blink. You've already screwed this up. You might as well tell the truth. It won't save you, but it might save whatever's left of these idiots you brought with you. His jaw twitched. One of his men shifted uneasily. You shut your mouth, he snapped. But I kept going, slow and calm, like a man narrating his own documentary. You poisoned me for weeks. Leah fed you information. You two planned to split the insurance payout. You brought Daniel in when he got desperate. You followed me here to kill me. And you're so arrogant, you can't even see the cameras. Colby froze. Behind him, Tattoo Nick frowned. Cameras? What cameras? Metalhead took a step back, finger tightening on the trigger. Colby, you said this was clean. I smiled, not with triumph, but with the tired truth of a man who'd lived long enough to know how predictable human greed is. Look up. All three men did. And the tiny red light in the rafters winked back at them. Tattoo Nick swore. Metalhead looked betrayed. Daniel, my brother-in-law, my late wife's blood stumbled backward, like he'd taken the bullet meant for me. No. No, Colby, he whispered. You said nobody was watching. I told you to shut up, Dan. Colby barked, voice cracking. But it was too late. The two hired muscle weren't loyal. They were scared animals who'd just realized the cage door was swinging shut. You didn't tell us about cameras, Metalhead growled. You didn't tell us about her either. She set this up with you, Tattoo Neck demanded. The wife, Colby's jaw tightened, but he couldn't deny it, not with all three of them staring him down. Leah handled the inside, he snapped. I handled the outside. Simple. Daniel's face went gray. You used me, he whispered. You, Leah, both of you. Colby raised his gun again, waving it to regain control. Everyone shut up. We're leaving now. I let my body shift subtly, edging toward a waist-high rusted metal crate by my knee. Heavy, loud, exactly what I needed. Leaving? I asked quietly. Where cameras have you, sirens have you. Your men don't trust you. Leah's using you. You think anyone's walking out of this clean? Colby snarled and stepped forward. Perfect. I shoved the crate with my heel. It toppled, crashing into the concrete, with a metallic thunderclap that echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. That was the signal. In the forest, Mark Halstead sat forward in the surveillance van. That's it, he said. Move. The doors of the warehouse exploded inward, with a roar of boots and shouted commands. FBI, drop your weapons. Flashlights swept the walls like lightning. Colby spun and fired a wild shot before two agents tackled him to the ground, disarming him. Tattoo Neck raised his hands and dropped his gun instantly. Metalhead froze terrified and went down without a fight. Daniel didn't even resist. He collapsed to his knees, hands behind his head, tears streaming down his face. Gabe, I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry. Agents cuffed him gently but firmly. Even then, he cried harder, shoulders shaking under the weight of what he'd done. Colby thrashed on the floor. This isn't over, Meyer. You hear me? That woman's gonna finish what Mark Halstead stepped into view and shoved a boot against Colby's shoulder, pinning him down. Shut up, Mark growled. You're done. Then he turned to me. You all right, Gabe? I nodded, though I wasn't sure the answer was true. At 55, adrenaline doesn't surge, it drains. It leaves you shaking, breathless, feeling every year you've lived. But I was standing. I was breathing. I was alive. Mark glanced toward the door where agents dragged Colby out into the rain. That piece is finished, he said quietly. Then he looked me dead in the eyes. Calm, certain, deadly serious. Now he murmured, it's Leah's turn. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something close to relief. Not vengeance, not bitterness. Just the clean, steady truth. Justice wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't a brawl. It was outsmarting the darkness with nothing but grit, experience, and a mind that refused to die quietly. Leah didn't go quietly. FBI agents surrounded the house at dawn, red and blue lights washing across the siding, the window panes, the porch swing. She'd insisted we buy together to make this place feel more like a home. She stepped out the front door in a long, dark teal dress, the one she wore whenever she wanted to look soft, innocent, untouchable. Evan watched from the street. He shouldn't have been there, but nothing could have kept him away. When Leah saw him, she froze. Evan, sweetheart? He backed up like she'd raised a knife. I'm not your sweetheart, he snapped, voice thick, broken. You tried to kill my father. Her expression cracked just once, then stitched itself back together into performance mode. That's not true. I was threatened, Colby forced. Save it for court, one of the agents said as they cuffed her. She kept her eyes on Evan until they pushed her into the back seat of the cruiser. He didn't look away. Later, he told me, I thought she cared about us, Dad. I thought she cared about you. It hurt him more than it hurt me. That was the cruelest part. Seattle Federal Court. 4 weeks later. When they brought Leah into the courtroom, she wore the same teal dress, pressed immaculate, but hanging differently now. Like fabric isn't sure if it should still love the body it's wrapped around. Her wrists were shackled. Her eyes searched for me instantly. I didn't look away. It wasn't hatred she saw. It was the quiet grief of a man who'd already buried one wife and now had to bury the illusion of another. Her attorney stood tall and righteous, trying his best to scrub the blood off a corpse. Your Honor, my client was coerced, intimidated by Colby Reed, a dangerous offender with a history of violence. She feared for her life. But the prosecution barely had to try. Camera footage, audio recordings, the warehouse confession, her texts, her calls, her insurance application submitted 3 days before the poisoning started. Every pixel, every syllable, every timestamp stacked against her like a mountain she couldn't climb. At one point, The prosecutor played a clip of Leah in the kitchen, leaning across the counter toward Colby, whispering, "He trusts me. Gabriel always trusts the people he shouldn't." My hands tightened, but I didn't react. I'd heard worse things than that in my line of work, but never from someone who once slept beside me. Then came the moment I didn't expect. The judge asked whether I wished to give a statement. I stood. The room quieted the way it does when people expect anger or vengeance or theatrics. They didn't get any of that. "Leah," I said, turning toward her, "I'm not here to punish you. The law will handle that. I'm here to understand." Her jaw trembled. Why me? It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was the simple question of a man who had lived long enough to know that answers don't heal, but silence wounds deeper. She blinked, hard eyes shining. "You were easy," she said at last, voice soft, fragile. "Men like you, older, grieving kind, you want to believe in someone again." A tear rolled down her cheek, but I didn't trust it. "Not anymore." "And the money?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "Yes, and the money." The courtroom murmured. But what struck me hardest weren't her words. It was the way Evan, sitting behind me, flinched like a child who just learned love can be a weapon. I wasn't just confronting Leah's betrayal. I was confronting a truth I'd been avoiding, that people my age, people with history, people with scars, are targets in ways the young will never understand. Our loneliness is marketable. Our grief is exploitable. Our kindness is profitable. And Leah knew it. When the verdict came down, she stood motionless. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. Insurance fraud. Collusion with organized crime. Maximum federal sentencing guidelines. No chance of early release. Her teal dress suddenly looked too bright, too hopeful for the woman wearing it. As marshals took her away, she turned to me once more. Not with love, not with remorse, but with the stunned disbelief of someone who finally realized the world doesn't bend for her. "Gabriel," she began. But I shook my head. Not in anger, but in finality. Evan slipped an arm around my shoulders as she disappeared through the side door chains, clinking softly like the closing bars of the life she'd destroyed for herself. "Dad," he whispered, "it's over." But I knew better. It wasn't over. Not yet. One last piece of the past was waiting to be confronted. A piece I'd been avoiding for 8 years. And justice, once awakened, doesn't stop halfway. I used to think a house was just wood, dry, a wall and memories. Turns out, sometimes it's a coffin you keep living inside, without realizing it. 2 months after Leah's sentencing, I sold the place on Cedar Ridge. Didn't even wait for the lilac bushes to bloom in the spring like I usually did. I handed the keys to a young couple who smiled like the world couldn't touch them yet, and I truly wished they could keep that innocence a while longer. Then I walked away, without looking back. My new place is a 1-bedroom apartment, above the waterline in Gig Harbor. Modest, barely furnished. Windows facing the strait, where the gulls scream like they are telling jokes. Only the sea understands. At 55, you start craving simplicity, the way younger men crave noise. Every morning I sit with a cup of coffee that I make black, no sugar, no lice, and watch the fishing boats drift out at dawn. And every morning I feel myself settling into a life that isn't defined by who tried to kill me, but by who stayed beside me. Evan moved back to Tacoma, 10 minutes away. He comes by on Sundays for dinner, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just bringing silence. He doesn't know how to turn into words. We talk anyway, awkwardly at first, then easier. Real conversations. Father and son, not two strangers trying to respect each other's boundaries. One evening, he stood at my balcony railing watching the sunset turn the water copper. "You know," he said, "I used to think you chose work over us. Over Mom." over everything. I swallowed. The truth hurts even when you've lived long enough to expect it. And now I see it. Now I know you were just Alfani, trying to fill the spaces left behind. He glanced down at his hands. I get it now, Dad. I really do. It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly. It was understanding. And for men like us, sometimes that's the same thing. Mark Halstead visited a week later, carrying that beat-up leather satchel he never goes anywhere without. He dropped into the chair across from me, groaning like his knees were older than mine. Got a proposal, he said without preamble. That sounds dangerous, I replied. He smirked. I want you consulting with the Bureau. Quiet work, case analysis, narrative reconstruction. Helping younger agents see the parts of the story they keep missing. I raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job because I survived or because you're tired? Both, he chuckled. Then his face turned serious. Gabe, you're too sharp to retire. Men like you burn out if you stop using the parts of your brain that made you who you are. I looked out the window at the gray-blue horizon. I thought about the years I spent chasing truth like it was oxygen. Thought about the nights I nearly lost my life in pursuit of justice. Thought about the morning I almost didn't wake up because someone I trusted slipped poison into my drink. But most of all, I thought about purpose, how men my age crumble without it. All right, I said softly. Part-time. Mark grinned like he'd known the answer all along. A week later, a thin envelope arrived in the mail. Return address: Washington State Corrections. Sender Daniel Whitford. I stared at it for a long time, letting the past rise like a tide I wasn't sure I wanted to wade into. Inside was a single page handwritten in Dan's shaky scrawl. Gabe, I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know your sister loved you. My wife loved you. And if she were still alive, she'd hate what I be. I failed her. I failed you. And I failed myself. Thank you for not letting anyone die because of my weakness. Whatever's left of me is trying to be better in here. I hope someday you can believe that. Dan. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hand. Life gets quieter after 50. But the echoes get louder. I don't know if forgiveness is something a man can force out of himself. Sometimes it's not a choice, it's a slow thaw. But as I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, I realized something: I didn't hate him anymore. That didn't mean I trusted him. Didn't mean I excused him. Didn't mean I'd forget. But I didn't hate him. And that small shift, barely noticeable, felt like the beginning of healing. In the evenings, when the sky dims and the apartment lights glow against the water, I sit with a notebook, sketching ideas for a memoir I'm not sure I'll ever publish. Not about Leah. Not about betrayal. Not about Kefi. But about being a man who survived all of it. And about how, against every odd, a few good people pulled me back to shore. The wind off the sound was sharp enough to wake the dead. It barreled in from the dark water, carrying salt and cold, and the kind of honesty you can only find near the ocean. My balcony light hummed behind me, a warm square of yellow that made the rest of the world feel like a movie set, quiet, suspended, waiting for the last line of dialogue. I set the bottle of Macallan 18 on the railing. The same brand Leah used to lace with poison. Funny how something can be both a comfort and a ghost. I unscrewed the cap and poured a finger into my glass. Just one finger. At 55, it's less about the drink and more about the moment. I lifted the glass, then paused. Old habits, hard habits, necessary habits. I tilted it toward the light, watching for the slightest shimmer, any grain, any swirl of something that didn't belong. My eyes scanned it, the way I used to scan evidence boards at 3 a.m. Clean. I laughed under my breath, soft, tired, but real. Good, I murmured. Damn good. I raised it to my lips and took a slow sip. The scotch was warm, smoky, steady. It grounded me the way the earth does after a long storm. Below, the waves slapped against the rocks, relentless and alive. Above, the clouds drifted thick as wool, swallowing the moon in slow, lazy gulps. I leaned on the railing, letting the night wrap around me. Life after 50 is a strange country. Your body slows. Your past gets heavier. You stop pretending invincibility is an option, but you learn things, two important things. You learn you can be betrayed and still stay gentle. You learn you can be targeted, used, lied to, and still protect what's good in you. You learn that age isn't a weakness, it's a damn compass. I whispered into the ocean air, I didn't win by feasting dirt with dirt. I won by remembering who I was. I thought about Leah, her teal dress, her trembling lies. About Daniel, his letter smudged with regret. About Evan standing between me and the world, like a man who finally understood why fathers break and rebuild differently. And then I thought about the others out there, men and women my age, who've been knocked down by loss, by betrayal, by time. Listen, I said softly, as if someone besides the gulls might hear me. You're never too old to rise again. Never too old to take back your story. The wind swallowed my words, carrying them out across the sound. I finished the scotch, closed my eyes, and let the air sting my face clean. Then I stepped away from the railing and moved toward the edge of the balcony where the mist blew in, thick and silver. For the first time in a long time, I walked into that fog, not as prey, not as a man running from a poisoned glass, but as someone who had survived everything meant to bury him. A man free, a man whole, a man finally undeniably alive. You know, if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that life doesn't stop hurting just because you get older. But it doesn't stop offering second chances either. I learned that betrayal can break your bones, but it can't break your will, not unless you hand it over. I'm 55. I've buried a wife, survived a poisoned marriage, and walked out of the dark with my head still up. Not because I'm fearless, but because I refuse to stay down. So if you're watching this, and you're my age or older, remember this. You are never too old to rise again. Never too old to fight for the truth. Never too old to take your life back. And if someone counted you out, he smiles, small but real. Stand up anyway. It drives them crazy.